Ooh, it's spooky season. Feels like it comes earlier every year, but we're going to pull out our crystal ball and do a spell to foretell the future of learning and development. Woo! What do you think we're going to do on this week's episode of the Learning Geeks podcast, starting now? Whoa, welcome.
Welcome. You watch too much.
I'm not sure how to
Avatar.
respond to that.
Yeah. Dana, how are you feeling? Anyway, yeah, you know what? We're recording this towards the end of September, about the time that spooky season usually starts. I live in Southern California and have an annual pass to Disney, so my Halloween started like July. I think they start putting stuff out, and I'm not even.
It started at Costco in July too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say most stores started around that time, but Disney, I would imagine. So it really is July. Do they have it all up, or they've
got merch up in July, but they start doing at Disneyland. We get the Oogie Boogie Bash, and they start doing those special, separately ticketed events in August. Man. Yeah, and then so a couple of weekends ago, I ran the Disneyland Halloween half marathon, and it was super.
How did you do?
I finished, which was the goal, and it was super hot, right? So it's supposed to be this Halloween fall theme, and it's heat warnings, and it was very, very hot.
Well, you're used to Midwestern falls,
right?
With all the time in Chicago, the leaves are literally falling on the ground, and it's brisk, crisp air.
Yeah, but the reality is
California
at this time of year, though, even in the Chicago area,
it's warm.
It's warm. I mean, September is one of those months where you can get a cool week, and then the next week can be 80, 90 degrees Fahrenheit again.
Yeah.
Like this week, it's like 80 upper, like mid 80s. But then tomorrow, the next day, I think it drops to 70.
Okay.
Upper 60s.
Yeah.
So more fall.
We're in the 70s.
Yeah. It's been nice and cool out here this last week too. So it's like 65 right now.
So that feels more.
That's in Fahrenheit for all
Halloween.
of our, listeners all around the world.
Yeah.
65.
So Jake, before you got on, I was telling Bob that Julie and I are next week going to ride our bikes down at Zion National Park and then Bryce Canyon. And we chose this time of year because it's going to be in the mid 80s, which is really nice for that because it can, it can be upper 90s, hundreds are not uncommon, 110 is not uncommon. And then if you get into those canyons, the walls heat up.
Yeah.
Right? And that just magnifies the heat. So it'll be fun, and the temperature's supposed to be great. So it'll be fun.
And Dana's been sending us regular drone pictures and videos that he's been taking, and starting to see fall in Utah a little bit. That's pretty amazing.
You saw some of the trees were turning red. And some of the leaves were.
Yeah, it's looking good.
Yeah,
give it another week and a half, and it'll be most of it'll be in its prime.
Yeah,
some of those drone shots reminds me of, I don't know if you guys have Apple TV or like a latest Apple TV 4K or something, but they do the drone aerial shots as like amazing. The screensaver.
Yeah,
and it does feel like that would be what would be on it
for sure. Yeah, it's great stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, it's good. It's really, I mean, you live in a really pretty place.
It's something I'm learning in retirement.
Exactly. Right? You should have retired much sooner, obviously.
But. I should have. Yeah.
Well, as everybody can tell by the length that this banter segment has gone on, it's just the three of us today, but we have a great topic. It is the future of learning and development. And Jake, I'm going to turn it over to you as the instigator of this topic, or the person who was inspired to lead us through this topic, to kick us off.
Yeah, the right word is inspired to lead through, because I'm actually going to be mentioning a direct quote for some guy who may be on this podcast, who was on another podcast. So, I also love the fact that when, Dana's retired, he goes off on these other podcasts and just drops these big truth bombs of how we're going to be how the industry is going to be disrupted. And then, he walks away. But anyway, so so it was.
Yeah,
It
and
was
then
on
I get the
July.
call.
It was in.
I get the calls from Accenture people who are like, "What did Dana just say?" And I'm like, I don't know. He doesn't work for us anymore. They're like, "Real?" Yeah. Anyway, it doesn't really happen. I'm joking. Go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, so on mid-July, Dana was on a podcast with Bob Mosier. So it's the Workflow Learning and Performance Alliance podcast, and it was Mark Wagner, I believe. I think was also the guest. Dana, right?
Yep.
VP. He was a former VP of Learning. And so I'm going to pull this quote, and it's again mostly word for word. There might be a small bit that I had to reduce, but here it is, the direct quote. So, or again, the quote: "You need to ask the tough questions. Do we really need a learning function? In my heart, no, we don't. We need a performance function. There are implications around that. So the type of skills, where it's located, where it's co-located. If you were spinning up an entirely new company and you had a magic wand, I say you're not building learning function. It was going to look very much different than what we have today. There is so much legacy, not only around processes, methodology, courses, curriculum, but also around the whole structure of the learning function. So there are some tough questions we need to ask ourselves in order to really make workflow learning happen. So Dana, I'm going to turn it over to you first. Is that still what you believe? Why so? And also, what are some of those tough questions?
Is this turning into a debate? Is it like, okay, you have 2 minutes, sir?
I was kind of thinking originally we could, but then I never took debate class, so like I'd be awful at it. So
I know. I didn't either. But I'm pro. Spoiler alert. But Dana, you go ahead.
I couldn't say it better myself, Jake. Well, in fact, I did say
How
it
long
myself.
were you working on that?
I know.
Yeah, it just came to me just like that. No, I mean, having worked in the industry for so long, I saw a lot of the structures really become solidified. And when I say structures, I'm talking about the way that L&D people are rewarded, the way that courses and course catalogs are presented on various technologies, and the skills that people are developing, the ways that things are templatized to make it so you can create courses faster, so you can get more people through them quicker, and then the whole notion of in so many onboarding classes, right? We all know this. There are certain things that are taught in these classes that really are not learning. People need to act and behave differently than they might otherwise do. So when seeing all of these structures evolve, it's like when you if you think about the way they build a building, right? First you lay the foundation and then you just start building upward. Well, that's kind of the way the whole L&D function has evolved, and there's not been a lot of shifting from that foundation. And we all have bought into the idea that we should really be about performance, about can people do the job? Can they actually do the thing that they're hired to do? And yes, learning can get people to a certain point, but often learning is wasted because they don't get it when they need it, they don't get it where they need it. And so we've all bought into that. And a lot of that mentality and mindset goes counter to the foundational concepts that have evolved over the years that I've been involved in training. So yeah, I still think it's true. I think if a company were starting from the beginning and they hired Dana as a consultant, what they would put in place would not be what we look at today as an L&D department.
And so, Bob, you felt the same?
Oh, totally. I think back, as you were just talking, Dan, I think back to the early days of this show. Remember, we used to have our RIP segments as we were laying things to rest. And
maybe we should revive that too. There's additional things that need to go the way of
Dana. I couldn't agree with you more. I came back from a holiday break, Christmas break, a couple of years ago. Said, I had an epiphany over break. Learning is dumb. That didn't go over very well. So then I had to clarify it. Now what I say is corporate learning is a waste of time and money unless it leads to improved business results. And that is all about performance.
And the only way you can get to those improved
exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a couple of different things is first off, I'm starting to see a little bit of a trend of learning leaders talking about this and thinking
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
way. You know, at
Yeah.
ATD, Jim Kirkpatrick got up there and he was like, shouldn't be L&D anymore. It should be L&P, learning and performance. Like, yeah, that's great. It's great.
Yeah.
The other thing is, I think there's a lot of stakeholder work that needs to be done to get us to this point, because I have experienced a lot where there are leaders in the organization, in an organization, that say, okay, I see a problem. I see a problem with performance. The answer is learning. So I'm going to make learning happen. And the way the learning is going to happen is we're going to do a 3-hour webinar, and I'm going to tell a bunch of things to people, and then the performance problem will get fixed. And I mean, that they might not even be thinking that far, but that is what they are trying to realize. And so for us to say as learning professionals, look, we're not coming to help you make learning. We are coming to help you build the performance you need to reach your performance goals. I think that's key. And then
Well, there's a couple of.
I was going to
Go
throw
ahead.
one other thing on the pile too, is how many performance management functions at companies, performance management, it's out there. It's a box in the HR structure, but it's not at all about improving performance. It's about measuring performance,
Yep.
leading to comp. And
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
we change that mindset as well?
Yeah. Yeah, and those labels are important. That's one of the things I was going to say, because you said learning professionals. What would it be like if you started referring to yourself as a performance professional? Or maybe that's not the right term, because that implies dance or some other things, maybe. But
What if we rebranded our podcast to the Performance Geeks?
here we go.
Okay, I know
The learning performance geeks.
Yeah, right. Okay, we're gonna let's walk away from that. Let's backwalk that right now.
I was gonna say,
All right.
because at the end, it's still at the core, there still is learning involved in
Yeah.
it.
There is.
I think
Yeah,
the
yeah.
term learning that always frustrated me in an organization setting is that learning is associated with the event or the curriculum, or that the digital e-learning thing. It's like that's what it's associated with, rather than the process itself.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
with us, it's like us, I still believe like that is our core. We just geek out on the process of learning new things that leads to new performance. But yeah, that's one thing that I've noticed throughout much of my time. I've always been questioning, why do we talk so much as learning as a thing rather than the process to get you to better performance.
I really like that, Jake, because what that's doing, you guys know how big I am into the biology of learning. That's just so critical. And I think what you're hitting on is when you quoted me very nicely, by the way.
Mostly direct.
Mostly direct, yeah.
Things
but when you quoted me, what I was talking about is the institutionalized structures that really, in some ways, have nothing to do with the actual cognitive process that are going on. Or they could, but most often they don't, right? Because you measure, did Dana go to a course? Yes, he did. Okay, then he's legally compliant.
Right.
But I could still goof up because I fell asleep halfway through the webinar.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or, my dog came and jumped on me, or I don't know.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that separation between the cognitive process of actually learning and the organizational terminology that's often used for learning.
Yeah.
I like to talk about our friend Heather Geiger. I will name drop Heather, who leads ethics and compliance learning for us, as the first person I ever met in ethics and compliance learning who actually cares that people learn something.
Yeah.
And the quality of the programs that have come out under her leadership definitely show that it is interested in helping people learn things. But to your point, Dana, so often the point of doing ethics and compliance training is just to create the paper trail. So if something goes bad, they can say, well, we trained him, so it's his fault.
Yeah. There is a lot of compliance in general, not just in the classic ethics and compliance realm, But if you think about go to an industry or go to a specific function within that you're supporting them, many times they just want something that's compliant, where they can just prove and show that X number of people did this, not
So
necessarily learned it.
let me ask one of those tough questions to both of you. Here's another one of those tough questions that we've bantered around, this concept of a performance function. Is it feasible to think that we can take the current L&D structure and move it into a different structure that's focused on performance? Or do we need to just kind of nuke what's there and start from scratch?
It's a really good question. Yeah. We actually, at our Learning Ingenuity Summit that we just had a few weeks ago, and we missed you, Dana.
And which I was excluded from.
Yeah, for some reason. And would have been fun to have you, Jake, but wrong company. I actually threw this out to my team at the beginning of the summit. I said, what if we changed our name from Learning Ingenuity to Performance Ingenuity? And we talked about it for quite a while. And at the end of the day, we said, we don't want to do that, because if we do that, we are assuming, just by the name, we are assuming in an implied fashion that we are responsible for things that are outside of our realm of control, right? So much of performance depends on the feedback that you get back from your supervisor. And if we don't control that, we can help nurture that, but we don't control it. And so ultimately we decided we're just going to stay Learning Ingenuity, but we're going to shift our mindset that it is about performance, that the end result we're looking for is performance, and not just kind of your typical learning measures and stuff like that. So there is part of me that thinks, to make this work, it's not just a simple expansion of the mindset of the learning field, that you do have to come up with a new structure, and it's probably bringing in people from a variety of different disciplines across HR in order to make that succeed.
Yeah, I agree. And Dana, I think when you're asking that, it makes me think of the trends work that we did 2 episodes before the finale, or 1 episode before the finale of last season. One of them continues to be the de-siloing of the people function, HR, whatever you want to call it, but it's just that function that consists of people analytics, performance, learning development, and others. Because I think going forward, if you look at across those teams, there's a lot of expertise on those teams that, when combined, you can really solve some effective development problems, like true development, like people development problems. Whether or not it's someone that's well known in statistical analysis, or like true people data that can look at the data and figure out what are some of the trends that we can see internally from the data that we can have, or they can think about what kind of data can we integrate together to make better decisions for the future as an organization or the individual themselves. So like my favorite thing that our industry, L&D, has always talked about is personalization. You can't do anything without great data. You just can't. You just can't. So if we're not good at it, how the heck are we going to make personalization for people to happen? Nor can you create personalization if it's just in a siloed, like a course or some type of simulation, because you have to think about everything else that exists. So those types of people can be really effective. Or someone that understands the formality part of evaluations, because I think one of the things in the short term, that's still something I don't know how you're going to completely change, because it does link to comp and all that. But they know a lot about how could we, from a learning part, help say, hey, when you do that part, how do you involve the process of learning, or the idea of supporting them when they get that feedback, that formal feedback, like how do I move forward? So that's where I would see, Dana, is there's an opportunity here to think about your expertise across the different teams and start figuring out how to merge them to solve the true business problems that you do have from a people side.
Well, and that starts to hit on the skills, right? The skills that would be needed in that type of a function. And I know one of the things when Bob Mosier and Conrad and I talk is the whole workflow analysis. You need to know where the pain points are. Where is it that people are not performing? And it really starts with understanding that whole flow. Then you can get into what type of an intervention. I don't think at least I've not seen good skills in that area in L&D function.
I'm going to go back to you, Dana, then to think about skills and roles. That was another
Mm-hmm.
question I had when I was listening to your podcast. What do you think are some of the roles that are not going to exist? And then what are some of the roles that you think should exist, or at least let's say even skills that we should, like those that are currently in L&D, should start to be building?
Yeah. Well, I think around a couple of things come to mind. One is the whole notion of course creators. I don't think it's going away, but I think the mindset needs to shift into not creating a course, but creating the right content to be delivered at the right time. But there's a lot of around that I think could be impacted, like the people who measure how many courses were taken by how many people, right? Because that will become less relevant. There has to be a new system of measurement. It could be that, and I think you kind of alluded to that some of the things that are currently being done in the learning function would get merged with some of the other departments. Like maybe there should be a closer relationship between the HR folks who measure data within HR.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I think a couple of things that are coming out. One is the whole area of measurement around performance and what's the data. And when you talk about collecting data, we've talked often about how it's not just data around how the task is performed, but it's also data around the individual and what does the individual know. Because ultimately, the ideal performance solution is going to be a marriage of those couple of things.
Mm-hmm.
What do we know that Dana already knows? Right? Okay, so if he already knows these things, then we have this thing that is no longer relevant. He knows that, so let's not give him that. Let's give him this other thing.
Yeah.
Because that's where his gap is. Whereas Jake might need A, right? Jake might need the first thing in that same performance spot. That might be what you don't know. And if the systems don't know what Dana knows, then again, we'll be going down the hole of providing stuff that's not as relevant.
We've been saying to get to the vision that we have for, like personalized AI tutors and all that kind of stuff, we need a digital twin of a person's brain. Like you really need to know like everything that they know, what they want, what their experience is. We need to know a lot of data about them in order to get to the level of personalization that we think would be most helpful. And yeah.
Which is interesting and exciting, but scary.
But scary and challenging. We might have to like open up a decommissioned nuclear plant to pay for or to get all the energy for all that AI. I don't know if you saw that article about Microsoft today.
Well, so another question I could ask is, and again, we kind of already alluded to this, but where should that performance function be housed? Should it be something all of its own? Jake, you were talking about removing silos, or should it be integrated into other things?
I don't know if I have an answer yet from an organizational standpoint. Where would it go? But I do know that even as a next step, like the more and more you can work, like if leaders are looking to how do we solve performance problems faster and more efficiently, is to start to combine some of the expertise across those silos. I mean, I personally have had experience in the last 2 years doing it, and it's been refreshing for one, and then two, I'm learning a ton. I'm learning a ton and thinking about, like, I think as all of us, right, we're designers. We love thinking from the experience side, and it forces you more and more to think at a holistic service level rather than sometimes when we have a very constrained time space in terms of like the experience that we're designing for. So this is forcing you to think truly in more of a service design. And I find that pretty fun and challenging at the same time.
I like that you introduced the word fun, because in some ways we're talking a little bit of gloom and doom, right, to an L&D department. But I think people's jobs would be more exciting and more fun if you get to the point where you're actually seeing people that you're helping to perform do it better,
Yeah.
do it faster, do it more efficiently, and getting rewarded appropriately.
Yeah.
Because I think that's why we're all in the business, right? We're all in the business to help people do their things better.
Yeah.
It's just that we've had models in place that aren't as efficient as they could be.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for introducing fun.
Try to somewhere.
It's always good to have fun at work.
So then, Bob, maybe going back to you, I'm just looking at our time because we only have a couple minutes, but when you did have your team meeting and you proposed some of those questions,
yeah,
were there any specific skills that you as a team think that you need to start developing in? Or have you not gotten that far?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're going to research this year is behavioral design and how do we really influence behavior. I have been interested by the fact that as much as I do believe in the skill centricity that we see in learning right now, and if I said anything different, our patron Saint Allison would come and beat me about the head. But it's true, I do believe in it. Skills is not the only ingredient for performance. You've got to actually do something with those skills. And
Right.
there are a lot of other factors that can influence the behaviors, whether or not people are delivering on those skills. So we want to take a look at that. What can we learn from other disciplines that try to influence somebody's behavior that we can start incorporating into what we do? That was probably the biggest one right now, Jake.
The only one that I can think of right now, well, actually, I have two. So there are a lot of people within this profession that have various roles.
Mm-hmm.
You may be more of a content developer. You may support the delivery of programs, or you may be the designer or program manager, whatever the case could be. But I do believe that there, even more so today, there is a strong need to have a foundational level of how the brain works.
Yes.
From a cognitive side. And
Yes.
I believe that everybody across all those roles should have it, because what we can continually if we think about the disruption of AI, what I think AI is doing more and more is going to take a lot of that technical side of work that we may have done and put it off our plate more, but then it leaves more of the human side that we can do to support. And if we could help people more directly, because there's people that are on the ground helping people in offices or in maybe the regional folks, their leaders, or maybe small other different communities. Like if they have a really strong understanding of how the brain works, then they can be designers there in that moment. They don't need a central design team to provide it. So that would probably be the one I would say. And then the second one was around the data and analytics side, is just to continue to amp up, go deeper into data and analysis. And personally, that is my learning goal, is to go further into that. So I'm already talking with individuals who are either data scientists, psychometricians, or people that are translators. What are you looking for? What are things that I can find? And even our friend Tessa Forshaw, she's been giving me been having a crash course of some of her thinking when it comes from a lab standpoint. So
awesome. Yeah, I would want to get in on that too, because that is something that I'm interested in as well. I think it's important.
I agree.
It's all of this doubling down on performance also means we need to double down on measurement.
I agree.
Yeah. Part of what you guys are talking about too is the helping the learners become better educated on how they learn.
Yeah.
Right? And we've done that learn to learn course, and some of that is biology, but some of it is also learning techniques. And I know in an upcoming episode we're going to be talking about some of the things around how you can be a better learner based on some good solid research. So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
I did want to say before we close out, I hope I don't come across as negative with those tough questions, because I love my L&D buddies, all around the globe, people I've met. And I wouldn't have stayed in this profession as long as I did if I didn't find lots of people with really good hearts and good integrity trying to seriously solve problems. I don't think the future is where we currently are
Yeah.
structured.
Yeah.
Well, at least you're not going on telling people learning is dumb.
See, I keep waiting for you to finish that. Learning is dumb, and so am I. It just kind of flows.
Touche.
Touche.
All right. Well, hey, thanks both for talking on this topic, and Dana for setting it up. But I did not get that vibe at all when you mentioned it. I think it's worth for every single function, regardless if it's L&D or somebody else, is to always have that question and framing of what is next. How do we think differently? How do we push ourselves? So yeah, I did not get that from you, but I felt like the discussion was very, very strong across all three to think considerately. We're not trying to say like we're going to blow up roles and stuff like that. It's just how do we get better at it?
Yeah. That's great.
It's good creative thinking.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. It's always fun to have a guest, but always great just for the three of us to get together and opine. And that was a lot of fun and hopefully valuable. Thanks to our listeners. As always, make sure that you like and subscribe and tell all of your friends about the Learning Geeks podcast. Have them join us. Would love to have them. Love to have you. And until the next time we see you, have fun and keep learning, people.
Boo.
Boo. Bye, everybody. Thank you.